Jordan, man, it is awesome to see you. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. How about yourself, Mike?
I am doing great. You are showing off a lot of pictures of some pretty good snow. Are you getting a lot of time out on the mountain?
Yeah, I think I've got like 42 days on the mountain so far this season, so it feels pretty good.
That's absolutely awesome. What do you enjoy about like what's the draw? What pulls you to the mountain?
There's so much research around how good it is to get out in nature. And so for me, it's especially like living in Vail. I tell people, oh, I ski 50, 60, 70, 100 days in a season. And most folks are tourists. They come out here and a ski day to them is like 8 to 4:30 or whatever. It's like a full day. For me, a lot of the times it may just be like a lunch break. And so for me, it's about getting out in nature. And like a lot of days, I may go for 45 minutes, 2 or 3 runs. But I just love getting to the top of the mountain, seeing this spectacular place that I live on our pretty cool planet Earth here. And yeah, a little bit of exercise, a little bit of movement of the body, some fresh air. Nothing beats it. It's pretty
What
amazing.
what do you replace it with when there's not snow? Like what fills that gap when there's no snow?
Still getting outside. So it's either golf, mountain biking, or hiking, or even like simple stuff like walking the dog. But to me, and it's so cool that there's so much science now starting to back up how good it is to get outside in nature, even if it's walking around the buildings of your neighborhood or whatever it is. If you're in a big city, nature is so good at connecting us to reduce stress, to reduce cortisol, and to actually like help us perform better. This topic that I've been talking about a lot of people with lately is like, we all know the best ideas come in the shower. Like it's cliche because it's so true, but yet so many of us think like I have to sit in front of my computer to get my best work done. And yeah, we all know this like thought of like the best ideas come in the shower, but yet that's not what we do or how we act. And so for me, I find so much inspiration from just getting outside as well.
Why do we struggle with that? Like where's the struggle come from of, hey, I just got to keep working because if I keep going at the grind, I'm going to go in and I'm going to get there and I'm going to get there versus the letting things go and letting the game kind of come to us or letting the information come to us.
Yeah, it's a lot of our neural wiring and how our brain is predispositioned. We are wired as humans to think short term. And that's how we've solved. That's how we've stayed alive for so many years. And so if we can take a step back, take a breath and realize, oh, if I actually go for this walk and I go on a little bit longer term mindset, I even thinking 30 minutes, an hour later down the road, it allows for this space. But it's hard for us to do that because the simple logical reaction is if I just put in more work, I'll get more of the thing done. And my background in sales, so like you got to hustle to get a lot of things done. It's not like, oh, I can just walk around outside all day and magically things are going to happen. There's got to be action that comes in with it. But that's why one of the key reasons it's really hard for us as humans to actually take that step back and see a little bit longer term viewpoint.
It's cool to hear you talk about the longer term viewpoint, even being as far out as 60 minutes or even 90 minutes, right? Like that's that perspective. It doesn't have to be this 3 year thing or this 3 month thing. It can really be 30 minutes away.
That's exactly it. The thing that comes to mind for me and the thing that I love to use with folks, you're probably familiar with like the Eisenhower matrix. It's like urgent, important, not important. And the urgent or the important but not urgent things are so hard for most of us to do, and that's why I love looking at companies as great examples for how we can actually live our lives too, because companies prioritize strategic planning. They do these things that for most of us, like a lot of people don't set goals because they don't see it as urgent. They don't see it in that next 20 or 30 minutes, even though they know, oh yeah, that's probably good for me over the next year. But so many urgent fires pop up that we never take that time to do the strategic planning for ourselves. It's also why a lot of people struggle to work out because you're not going to see that massive result too quickly. And so they say, okay, great. Like I'm going to push that off because I've got other fires to put out throughout the day. And this is where it's just fascinating noticing that our brain has done so good for us over the last X million years, whichever number you want to use, but hasn't really had a great chance to evolve and adapt to the way that life works today while we're digitally always on, where there are demands coming from us, where everyone's trying to steal our time more so than our food or our resources that would keep us alive in the past. And that's one of the reasons why, for me, again, getting out in nature and these other things really helps connect and slow down just a little bit.
Cool. I want to get into mindset in just a little bit, but I want to test something with you first quickly. And I'm a big fan of 2x2s, including the Eisenhower matrix. And one of the reasons I'm a fan of 2x2s is because typically we'll fall into a trap of making a decision based on a single set of criteria. So we'll just keep going. So somebody drops it on my desk, I got to take care of it. Somebody gives me a phone call, I got to take care of it. It's now, which gets into that whole urgent piece. And in a lot of cases, we think that the person who's making that thing urgent, that it's actually urgent from their perspective, and it's important. It's both of those things. Like we think they've already gone through the decision making piece. So, from a 2x2 perspective, that x-axis is our typical state, how we make decisions to kind of do things or keep going. What the y-axis does for us is it creates a speed bump, an opportunity to pause, a check, to just say, hold on, wait a second. Should I do this or do not? Should I do something? How do I slow things down, create some space around where I can actually use the executive function of the brain to make an effective decision? What do you think?
100%. This to me is the power of the pause. Something that I just posted about recently on LinkedIn is they show actually in Japanese culture, people can sit in silence before getting uncomfortable for about 8 seconds. Whereas in American culture, it's only a couple, like 2 to 4 seconds before we start getting uncomfortable, where we all want to fill the space in every conversation. I am a massive culprit of this. One of the reasons why I practice meditation and things to find that space to, on the speed bump or the slight pause brings up the Viktor Frankl quote in my head. It's like between stimulus and a response is a space. In that space lies our freedom to choose. And that's where our growth comes from. And
Awesome.
Yet the standard human brain is so focused on, is something going to kill me right now? There's studies that show about every 5 times a second, the brain is scanning the world around us to see if something's going to come kill us or threaten our lives. It's just not true in today's day and age. And so if you can find that microsecond, that tiny space to say, let me actually check in with this and see if this is the right priority. Is this actually urgent? Is this actually important? Now, all of a sudden you get a chance to say, oh, I'm going to operate from a little bit deeper part of the brain that is a bit more effective at making strategic decisions, or getting over to the right side of the brain that's a lot more strategic and visionary versus the left side that operates for most of us in today's culture pretty dominantly, that says do, 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 do. That's why we come back to saying I'm going to sit in front of the computer to try and grind out work, even when I know I'm stuck and not getting stuff done.
So let's talk about a specific practice. What's something that you do to help either get your mind right or start to trigger whatever the thing is that you're doing to help create that kind of pause and that space to work through it? What works for you?
Just did one, a deep breath in between responding. I'm just like want to run right into a response. But notice if you take one deep breath, you get a chance to actually formulate what you're going to say. You get a chance to articulate your thoughts a little bit better. So that's one for me. It's also kind of connected to using things like meditation. I've been meditating for a long time and still need to for a long time into the future to get where I want to go. But it's that mental training to just say, how do I notice what's coming up within me? How do I find that space or create a little bit of strength to be comfortable with a little bit longer silence? And then the third thing I'd add in there is write stuff down. Our brain is great at coming up with ideas and it stores it all, but it's really not efficient at working through them when it's just stuck in your head. So actually writing things down, whiteboarding it, putting it on a 2x2 all opens this way for us to have more effective executive function with how our brain and minds work together.
Awesome. Let's jump into mindset. What is mindset?
So I see there's multiple types of mindsets in terms of how we see and view the world. But fundamentally, the one that I take it back to at its root is what happens between our ears drives every single action that we take. So there's thoughts that come in through the head. 95% of them, in theory, from what studies are starting to think or show, are subconscious. that we don't even know. So really only 5% of what we operate with is our conscious mind. But mindset is saying, okay, how am I going to approach this? The one that's gotten so popular lately, growth mindset. So saying, great, how do I approach a challenge? Well, somebody with a fixed mindset, which is the opposite of growth mindset, may run into a wall and say, there's a wall. I'm stuck. I can't go anywhere. Whereas somebody with a growth mindset may say, there's a wall. I wonder how I can get around it. Could I dig a hole? Could I build a ladder? Is there a way to walk around? Could I go under? All these things to start finding ways to be more resilient, to bounce back from struggles and failure. And a lot of what we see is the mindset that the traditional Western schooling, at least, has conditioned us for or programmed us for, is this fixed mindset to say, oh, you got an F in class, you're a failure. Oh, you got an A, great, you're perfect. You never need to do anything. And yet then we see folks, so many folks struggling, whether it's with depression, anxiety, stress, suicide, in this world where we have all these amazing things. And so to me, mindset comes in a lot of different ways. The growth mindset's the one that's been really popular lately. And I think starts to open the door to start noticing, how do we actually take more executive control of the subconscious thoughts that are running through us and tailor them to move in a way that's more aligned with where we want to go and how we want to operate?
What are some mistakes that people make when thinking about just the word mindset?
A lot of people think it's fixed on that growth mindset example. They think, oh, this is who I am and I am who I am, and this is never going to change. Well, not only do we notice that we are all evolving and adapting every single day, sometimes that's adapting to more of what we've just done, but we've seen so many cool stories of entrepreneurs. And I think they're great examples there that, oh yeah, they didn't get their start until they were 40, 50, 60. Things like Walmart, Disney, all these other things where folks had to face so much rejection to actually bounce back and be resilient, to show up and be consistent or be disciplined, even when maybe the results aren't there in the short term. And so a lot of folks really struggle because we're conditioned to look for those short-term rewards. And usually the greatest rewards in life don't come with just tapping the easy button. It comes with getting uncomfortable. It comes with getting something new. And so maybe to answer your question more directly, one of the biggest struggles I see is folks with imposter syndrome. There's no way you can get to your 100th without starting your first. You've got to suck. And even the best in the world will have imposter syndrome, whether it's like Bono talking about, oh, I'm releasing a new album. He's, whether you like him or not, one of the most influential, successful folks out there in the music industry, and will still release a new record and be like, I'm afraid nobody's going to like it. And so many people are so afraid to try something new or get uncomfortable because we've been conditioned and programmed to live this comfortable life, but that's not really where the best rewards live. And so getting uncomfortable is one of those huge things that a lot of folks are scared of or struggle with mindset a lot.
So where does adversity or resilience, or maybe even both of them together, because I heard that both kind of come up in this piece, where does that fit into the human condition? When you talk about certain things being in our nature, where does adversity and resilience fit into the human condition?
So that was part of our lives every single day a couple thousand years ago. As we moved away from being hunters and gatherers and we learned how to farm, life became a lot more comfortable, became a lot more predictable. We became stationary. A lot of other issues come up that we don't have to get into, but we changed a lot of how we lived. And so the adversity, the resilience wasn't as needed, as opposed to, oh, I've got to go find what I'm going to eat today. Oh, now we've got this nice food pyramid, 3-5 meals a day, whatever you want, open the fridge, you get it, it's easy. And so that's where comfort has come in to be much more common in today's society. But adversity and resilience, it's one of the things I feel super lucky that I got into the sales profession early on. There's a lot of falling on your face. There's a lot of getting told no. I think playing baseball when I was younger helped me out too, because if you're successful 3 or 4 out of 10 times, you're pretty good. But for most of us, it doesn't come up as much in today's society. Yes, we have adversity within our lives. You got families that are, struggling. You get loss and grief and all these other things come up. But it is such a smaller part of today's life than it was for our ancestors a handful of thousands of years ago.
couple of things have come up, and I know we've got a couple of different things that we want to get into in the course of the conversation. One of the things is, what does it mean to be a professional? So you brought up baseball, and I think that's a pretty good fit into this professional. And one of the mistakes that a lot of people make, like you had just talked about, it's if you hit the ball 4 out of 10 times, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame. That's
Fail 60% of the time.
so let's talk. So let's talk about it. Like, what does it mean to be a professional?
Yeah. To me, there are a couple keys. Again, I use sales. That's where I spent so much of my time. And for a long time, I thought I was like, hey, I'm a sales guy, sales gal. It's just my job. Here I am. I'm on to something new. And when I started thinking about myself as a professional, I started thinking about, well, how do I improve? How do I work towards mastery? How do I build more competence to understand what does greatness look like? And so it started going into things like spending time on those important but not urgent areas. Oh, I want to go back and listen to a call that I just ran. Or now, oh, I'm going to go back and listen to a call that I ran with a client, coaching client. And so it starts to say, like, how do I actually review and put some intention behind what I'm doing here? How do I go study other people that have gone before me that have been great and excellent? How do I learn from others? And I think it's a Tony Robbins quote, but it's stand on the shoulders of giants. How do I go learn from people that have already fallen on their face a bunch of times so I don't have to make the same mistakes that they did? And it starts around being a professional is building a team around you. One of the concepts that I love to share with folks, again, I told you I love a lot of what companies do, but how do you build your personal board of directors around you? A company has a board of directors of folks that have different areas of expertise, whether it's marketing, sales, product, customer service, success, operations, finance. Well, great. How do you build that around yourself? Whether it's role specific, great. I want somebody that's great. And we'll use a sales or management example. It's like, great. I want somebody that's coaching, great at coaching one-on-ones, somebody that's great at forecasting and planning, somebody that's great at moving to that next level or that next step that I want to go to. And so to me, those are some of the key elements of really being a professional, thinking about how do you master your craft? How do you continuously improve? And how do you find others to support you and build that team around you? Just like every single professional athlete has a coach, a trainer, a nutritionist, and those different areas within their life and their profession.
Yeah, you kind of jumped into that next question I was going to ask, which is this: where does coaching play a part in this?
To me, I just think back on the times that I'm going to use baseball again here, that I'm going up there and I was in a slump and I was struggling. I was like, man, I'm just not, I played baseball my whole life, varsity 4 years in high school, like played a lot of baseball. And so I'm like, I know what I need to do. I know what my problem is. And then all of a sudden coach comes up. He's like, do you know that your left foot when you're stepping forward is stepping just a little bit out? Oh my God, I had no idea. I thought I had everything figured out, but having somebody outside of yourself take a look, they can see things so much differently, whether that's how you're mentally showing up, whether that's how you're physically showing up. So to me, that's one of the incredible benefits of having a coach is you bring in outside perspective to look at things differently. The other piece on coaching is accountability that I've always found incredibly goofy. That part of the reason why I pay coaches is to hold me accountable to do the things that I say that I'm going to do. I've literally got a message from my coach this morning. Hey, can you get me this thing before noon today? You said you were going to get it done. Boom, done. Great. Thank you for that little reminder. It was on my list, hadn't got to it. So to me, coaching opened the door from some outside perspective, and then accountability are two key pieces in architecting and moving your life in a direction that you want that may not be the easy path.
What's a mistake that people make when thinking about coaching?
They expect the coach to have all the answers, and they don't realize that the power in coaching is usually not the one-on-one phone call. The power in coaching is what happens every minute in between the time that you're on the phone working with that coach. That's really when you're building it. Yeah, you may find the breakthrough. You may find one big moment, but if you do nothing with it in between those sessions or the conversations you have, it doesn't really do you any good and it doesn't stick.
So let's go a little bit deeper into the why. Why is that piece in between? And I know you said it doesn't do any good and it doesn't stick, and the need for repetition, putting work into practice. But like, why is it that some people think, you know what, I'm working with a coach, check the box, that's awesome, cool, good, yay me.
If what
Yeah.
change is hard. It's super hard. Again, we're fighting against this 95% of our subconscious, of our habits and our routines and patterns. There's this concept in neuroscience that's neuroplasticity, neurogenesis come in here. But the one that I actually really like the most is this concept called myelination, that essentially says the more times your brain does something, the faster and more efficiently it'll do it in the future. So example, in high school, I would drive to my girlfriend's house all the time. Of course, I was, young and in love. And all of a sudden I'd be driving somewhere, not going to her house, but autopilot would take me to her house. And I'd be like, wait, what? Because I wasn't really there. I wasn't present. I wasn't aware of where I was going and paying attention because I'm listening to music or whatever's coming up. And so there's this thought for us that we are always going to do whatever's easiest, whatever we've repeated the most. And so it's really hard to break that habit and break that programming and conditioning within your brain, say, oh, I want to go and do something new, which is why accountability is so powerful. Whether you think about your diet, whether you think about exercise, whether you think about your work, all these things have been programmed in us for many, many years. And especially when you're trying to do something new, which is usually where you're with a coach, you're trying to go to another level or unlock something in you new. It means you've got to build that repetition to actually get the change to happen.
What's your practice for building that repetition? Like, how do you go through it? Either when you're working with someone else or whether you're coaching them or you're in a coaching relationship with somebody else. What's your practice? How intentional are you in getting that repetition, and how do you make sure it happens?
I love James Clear and Atomic Habits for this one. And so I start out with, how do you make it easy? By simply saying, I don't need you to go from 0 to 100 to start. I need you to go from 0 to 1. Let's take that first step. Let's be okay with imperfection and take messy action. So the example, again, I used meditation before as an example. This is one that there's so many good benefits from it. There's great science behind it, let alone thousands of years of practice too, that probably has some reason for it to stick around. But so many people say like, oh, if you really want to meditate to get the benefits, you have to sit for 20 minutes in silence. And that's the only way it's going to happen. Well, no wonder why nobody does it. One, it's really scary. It's really uncomfortable. But two, most of us feel we're too busy to take out 20 minutes of our day to sit and, again, do nothing like we started out talking about. And so for that, it's like, great, let's just start with one breath in, one breath out. That's the foundation. And if that's all you're going to open up time for, awesome. But how do you make it easy for yourself to say, maybe, all right, I'm going to do 1 minute a day for the next week. I have a friend who I was talking with and a client who was like, I want to work out 30 days in a row this to start the new year. Shocker. Nobody's ever said that before, probably. How you doing? He's like, oh, I get to like 5-6 days and then it's gone. So what I went to with him first was, well, what's your definition of a workout? He's like, oh, like 20 to 30 minutes and I need to break a sweat. I love that. That sounds like a great workout. But if that's not working for you, what if we took that definition down to 1 minute a day, 5 minutes a day? Because if we can build consistency and build the foundation for that habit and start programming that into our brains, well, now all of a sudden we can move to say, all right, once I got 5 minutes, now I can do 20. Now I can do 30. Now I can move that bar up. But making it super easy to start is, to me, the best place for folks to really say, how do we get started in making this change or moving in this new direction? Make it super simple and easy. Sales, make one prospecting call. Because once you get started, momentum usually helps carry you farther as well.
So I want to get into authenticity next, but before we do it, I want to share another thing just to kind of test with you here. I think there's a lot of stuff that's garbage out there when it comes to mindset. And the reason why I think there's a lot of stuff that's garbage out there when it comes to mindset is a lot of the pieces that you have talked about relative to this is what it is or this is what it isn't. And something I've been kind of wrestling with is how to reshape the word and use of the word mindset so that we're in the best position to start to build skill set. And then with those skills, we can leverage tools, a tool set to move the world, right? So, and this all gets into some of the stuff I've done around the leadership wheel piece. So here's how I'm looking at mindset today. Mindset is a combination of attitudes and beliefs, so A and B, and clarity of definition, C and D. So attitudes, belief, clarity of definition. And you just highlighted how important that clarity of definition of what a good workout is or what a workout is. Because anybody who's worked out for any period of time or has done anything for any period of time, you realize if you don't create space for recovery, you will burn out. And you're going to fry the engine out, or you're going to the skis aren't going to work as well if they don't have a little bit of, I don't know if you still put wax on skis. It's been so long. Yeah, the last time I skied, it was before parabolic skis. So I had like these old K2 5500s and some Solomon bindings that were locked in. But like you need to go back in and either sharpen the saw to lean on a Covey thing, or Abe Lincoln, like all of these things. There's nothing new except what has been forgotten. Marie Antoinette. Yep. And that Shoulders of Giants one, that actually came from Newton, and Newton stole it from some Italian philosopher. So like it's
like an artist all along the way.
It's all the way through. So what do you think about that approach to mindset, that ABCD thing, attitude, belief, clarity of definition around whatever the thing is that you're trying to work your mindset around? So it might be a mindset around leadership. For me, leadership starts with self, and leaders build leaders. That's my attitude and belief around leadership.
Completely
what do you think?
I completely agree. There's two thoughts that come to mind for me as I heard you talking about that.
Cool.
One is the power of our perspective and our power to shape it. You know, our perspective defines our reality, because, you know, we just got through the Super Bowl and there are no good or bad events. It's just our definition that we put on it. So we've got, you know, Eagles fans. That was maybe one of the best days of their lives yesterday. Chiefs fans, maybe one of the biggest heartbreaks they've ever had. And so that's all based upon the story that's coming through their head, which is part of the mindset. And so as you think about your perspective on it, words and language are really, really powerful because they all have different meanings to different people. And so understanding that definition and having clarity on it helps us understand, okay, how do we move forward? And man, you've got me on like 5 different thoughts that I want to share on this, because there's really only a few things that we can control. It's that attitude. It's that belief. It's that faith. That's up to us. Nobody else is going to do that for you. And yet so many people get stuck thinking about things that are so far out of their control. I've been there. I still do it. But you can at least build awareness to say, okay, how can I control the self, to your point, to say, well, is that belief aligned with where I want to go or who I want to be or how I want to show up today? And the other one kind of within that is the power of reframe. I think that's one of the most powerful tools almost anybody can use to say, oh, well, what if I looked at this from a different perspective? Or what if, you know, the reframe that I like to use with a lot of folks that is like, well, how might someone else do this? You know, I talk to a lot of sales reps, sales leaders, and it's like, well, oh, who's somebody that you look up to? In sales, we talk about President's Club a lot. And it's like, well, how would a President's Club leader show up in this case or scenario? Now, all of a sudden you have a different frame to look at things a little bit different way, to take control of the attitude, the belief, clarity, and definition.
Awesome. And you hit on my definition of leadership, which is how we move forward. So like that's, and it is. So let's talk about alignment and authenticity and really go into this deeply, this whole idea of authenticity. And you've already heard a couple of the questions, like what is it and what are some common mistakes? But let's jump in. Would you rather define authenticity first or get into some of the common mistakes? Choose your own adventure, Jordan.
I'll go down the definition first. To me, authenticity is just showing up as an imperfect human. It's this concept that no, none of us are perfect. None of us have all the answers, and everyone is making it up as they go. And if we can start with that foundation, all of a sudden it allows vulnerability to open up. It allows this realness of the human experience, and brings up one of my favorite words that I learned from Seth Godin, sonder. Sonder. It's the fact that we are all the movie stars of our own movies in our head and have crazy experiences going on that are the most important things in our lives. And that connects to empathy, but it helps you start to say, like, yeah, the guy driving down the road that cut you off, maybe they're going somewhere, then they're in a rush. Maybe they're not, but we don't know. And so how do you think about that with someone on your team to say, we were talking about severance earlier before this, and it's like, we'd like to think that when somebody shows up at work, they are just this robot that has no other emotions, no other beliefs, no other struggles, no other challenges, no other aspirations. And that's just so far from the truth. We are these humans that want things, that struggle, that have fears, that have doubts. And to me, that's where authenticity comes in, to be able to say, I see you, and I see that, yeah, maybe there's a big work objective in front of you. What else is going on behind the scenes? Because those are the leaders in my experience that I am ready to go run through walls for. The ones that actually know that I'm a real human and not just a robot that's only in the work casing the times that I'm at work.
Have you ever had a situation where something else wasn't going on behind the scenes?
Absolutely not. There's always something there. There's always something usually. And sometimes, again, and this is where the coaching gets in a lot of cases, sometimes therapy, but a lot of times it may be something from years ago that comes up. Beliefs around money for me was a big struggle for a long time. My dad worked in a nonprofit for 30 years and I went out and made more money than him in sales in like my third year selling. And it was like, whoa, I shouldn't make more money than him. He does this like noble thing. He helps homeless families. And I had to work through a lot of that, and it still lives with me today. And so again, you get into beliefs and mindset. There are some of these things that really hang on for years and years with folks that may not come up. But I always think there's more to the story than just, hey, my sales rep, they're not making enough prospecting calls today. Well, you told them to dial the phone 5 more times over the last week and they didn't change their behavior. Maybe we've got to find out what's actually the root cause beyond just saying, hey, you should dial the phone more, because almost anybody that's intelligent enough to get a job in sales, which the bar's not that high, you don't need an advanced degree or anything of the sort to be an excellent seller. They understand that they should dial the phone more if they want to get more sales. But there's usually something under there that's either uncertainty, lack of confidence, lack of belief in what they're selling, that really gets into the meat of, oh, well, if we can uncover that, then we can take that next step forward.
So let's get into mistakes when it comes to authenticity or preconceived notions around why I can or cannot be authentic. What are some of the mistakes that people make when it comes to authenticity?
It's a lot of cultural programming, and a lot of us have bad habits and things that we don't necessarily want the world to see. And so it's this friction or tension between who do you want to project into the world versus who you really are. And I still struggle with this today. This is not something that goes away. And I think that's the first piece that most folks don't understand is everyone has some sort of little voice in the back of their head that usually says, you're not good enough, you can't do this, whatever it may be, that has that uncertainty or imposter syndrome or fear or doubt. Again, as humans, we were programmed to live in a state of fear and scarcity. That's how we've survived. That's how we've got to this place that we are today, which is so magical and incredible. But fear and scarcity isn't really what drives the best to perform and succeed. A lot of folks will look out there and say, oh my gosh, like there's not enough money in the world. Or they see, oh, somebody like Elon Musk with $400 billion. And it's like, he's got all the money. I'm never going to be able to get there. But there's other folks that go towards that side of abundance that say, there's so much money out there in the world. I just need to figure out how to go get it. And so that fear and scarcity is what holds so many of us back and keeps us afraid of being authentic, being vulnerable and saying, hey, like maybe I could ask for help. Like I talk to so many people that tell me they've never reached out to a coach before. This is the first time they've ever thought about it. And most of the time, people are doing that when they're in a state of pain, when they're like, I've tried everything else and I don't know what to do. And for me, my mission for a long time was to help folks to never have to get to that bottom, like feeling like they've hit rock bottom. But I realize like pain is the best motivator. That's how we make decisions most effectively. That's what's going to push us to do that next thing. So my mission's changed a bit there. But to me, it's that authenticity, and what people mess up is not realizing that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to admit that you are not a perfect human, that you have faults and flaws. And that's where I think most people screw up to start it off.
So let's make that a call to action for this. Ask for help. If you're out there, you're listening to this, you don't know where to go, or you haven't asked for help, or you don't know who to go to, ask Jordan for some help. Ask me for some help. We're out there. Ask both of us. And let us know in a comment about what happened when you asked for help. Jordan, what's a practice, or how have you seen organizations support authenticity at an individual level?
Yeah. So at HubSpot, there was a really cool thing that we did. And I'm sure we stole that from somewhere else, just like everything else we've talked about. But we had a thing called the Failure Forum, where leaders, individuals said, hey, like, can you get up and share a story about a time that you have failed? And all of a sudden that opens the door for this level of vulnerability, this authenticity from folks that were C-suite to individual contributors, to get up and say, here's a time that I failed. And then say, well, here's what I've learned from it. And it really leverages that power perspective, or the reframing that we talked about, where in sales for a long time and in life, we think it's win or lose. But if you can reframe that to win or learn, now all of a sudden, every time you fall down, every time you stumble, you have this opportunity to say, well, what can I learn from it? That gets the growth mindset, that helps condition the training that so many of us, again, just lost going through school. And we forget that we learn to walk by falling 100 times and picking ourselves back up. And so for me, that Failure Forum practice, getting folks together, hey, share a quick story, maybe 5-10 minutes on a time that you failed and what you've learned from it, is a really great way to open that door for authenticity, vulnerability. And then that transmits itself through the rest of the organization and every other way that folks interact with each other.
Super powerful. In fact, I'm going to actually test that with Jen a little bit later today about different things that I failed on over the course of the past 30 some odd years that we've known each other. It'll be emotional, and that direct connection will create space for there to be openness around, hey, how do we continue to move forward? How do we keep moving forward? Jordan, awesome conversation. Where can people connect up with you and pay attention to what you're doing?
Yeah, I spend most of my days on LinkedIn, Jordan Benjamin. You could also find my website, mycoreos.com is where I spend most of my time, but hit me up there and I'd love to connect, answer questions. If you don't know where to go for help, I got a big network of folks and usually can point folks in the right direction, or tons of books and other things as well.
I think that's one of the super powerful things of being intentional in the way that you build your connection, is you collect people and then curate those folks and then connect those folks. So you curate this library of people that are out there who can do a lot of the things that Jordan just described, or where he knows the experts in specific areas who are connected, whether it's connecting people on the slopes and sales, or it's connecting people in other areas. If you know somebody who would find value in this, please share it with them. Let Jordan and I know via LinkedIn. When you make those shares, it helps other people discover the podcast. They can find their catalyst, the thing that'll help them get that nudge to start moving forward. Jordan, thanks for doing this. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking different about your process?